Back here again on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Moradiega, still here talking some more football-related news, diving into more of the college-related news in today's episode. If you missed the last segment, I talked about NIL, the transfer portal, and some reports by Adam Schefter talking about how some college coaches are frustrated by the current environment of college football and what that could mean going forward for the sport if it gets too far in one aspect, going into a lot of contracts, focusing on money more, and what could that do for the sport overall. But now, sticking on the topic of college football, I wanted to talk about Caleb Williams and his situation not going with an agent. But before I jump into that, I want to remind you guys to please use the tip and donations link with any questions that you may have. Again, this show gets a lot of engagement, a lot of questions from viewers during the show. So to make sure your question is seen, I can read it and it's put to the top of the list. Please make sure to use the tip and donations link. That's streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. Again, if you can't see it on the screen and you're listening to this episode, the link for the tip and donations is streamelements.com/GSMCSportsNetwork./tip. It's a big help for the show, for the network if you guys do this, and it just makes it easier for me to see your question and for all the questions to just pop up on there, and it would be greatly appreciated if you guys would do that. But our third segment, Caleb Williams, the presumably first overall pick in this year's draft. The talent is through the roof. Everything you would want in a quarterback, the generational type of ability, throw power, mobility, is able to run when he has to, and just creating those magical plays. It's all there for Caleb Williams. He has it all. And because of that, deciding not to go with an agent was the news that broke recently surrounding Caleb Williams. And if you recall, this was something not too rare, I want to say, because you saw the most recent example of this is Lamar Jackson. He hasn't, to my knowledge, had any agent during his time going into the NFL, and everyone saw it in that draft, how he fell during the NFL draft, and now a lot of people are thinking that it was because of that. He was a young player. You know, there were some doubts about his throw power, how he would adapt to the NFL, but also not having an agent doesn't look great for a quarterback and a young quarterback that a franchise is going to invest a lot in. And a lot of people, it didn't sit right with them, and that's why now people are thinking that, you know, that's why he fell, or a big reason why he fell in that year's draft. Obviously, everybody knows what he is now, and probably wouldn't, if they could do the draft over again, probably wouldn't draft him as the last pick, but without an agent, he was able to negotiate a contract extension and be among the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, so that all worked out well for him, as well as Bobby Wagner. He's another one that negotiated his own recent new contract, and it all worked out for him. One thing I remember seeing from him, like a reason he gave for this representing himself, was that, you know, he's more mature, obviously, in the later part of his career, and he wants to challenge himself in other areas, and he felt that it was appropriate, and he was ready to take on that role, and again, it worked out for him. He negotiated a new contract himself and did a very good job of it, and there's not too many other examples of this, and other than this one, now that I wanted to talk about Caleb Williams not going with an agent, and it's not a big deal, in my opinion, now because of those two examples that I mentioned. I think franchises and organizations, owners are starting to become more open to it, and, you know, this was reported by Pro Football Talk, and it didn't gain too much traction, too much headlines from this, just because it's a different situation from anybody that we've seen. Usually these top guys have a big team, agents, people that just help them with this transition period. And number one picks usually have a support team, have that help that I just mentioned. But with Caleb Williams, he has all that, the talent and everything to be the number one pick, but just no agent. And it's just different because he's been talked about for a long time now, and he's, in the same conversation as the Andrew Lucks, the Trevor Lawrences, those kind of guys that transcend any type of quarterback that anyone's seen over the last few years. And a lot of people recently have always said that, the hype around Trevor Lawrence was high, but they've never seen anything like Caleb Williams. And that's just funny because it's just, they never see it until the next quarterback comes around, right? The next generational quarterback comes around. There's always going to be a next one, but Caleb Williams is the guy right now, and he's so anticipated. Everyone expects him to be the number one pick already that this won't really affect his stock too much, in my opinion, and a lot of people share that same opinion. But one personality, I guess, for lack of a better terms, in the media, Mike Florio said he gave some of his negatives that could come from this. He said that, having a lack of someone to defend you behind the scenes in the inner circles with executives, front office members, people like that, Caleb Williams can't be in those meetings. It's usually just reserved for agents and executives away from the football side. Now you're talking about the business side. And coming into the NFL, your first year, you're still not officially a player. You're still a college athlete. You're not going to be represented well in those circles, in those meetings, those quiet backroom talks that agents have with these executives to get their guys drafted as high as possible. The negative of that is the issue that a lot of people don't want to mention is that these agents have to sell their clients to these teams, and at times that could mean talking down on somebody else, making the other guy look a lot worse. And unfortunately for Caleb Williams, his decision doesn't allow him to have somebody in those circles to defend him. I'm not saying it's right to have somebody else talk bad about somebody else, but it's part of the process that nobody mentions, but it definitely happens. It's reality. These agents have to do their best to sell their clients, and Caleb Williams, yes, he doesn't have that person, to hype him up, I guess, if you want to say, to executives and front office members. But again, he's at a point now where everyone has seen him, and he almost doesn't need it, but it'll be interesting to see how it develops, if it actually does affect him a little bit, because everyone presumes that he's going to be the number one overall pick. But a lot of times there's always a surprise that's made in the draft. A team trades up, or the number one team just doesn't pick who you think. An example was when Saquon and Baker were coming into the draft, into the NFL. A lot of people had Saquon Barkley going one. Regardless of any team traded, it was always Saquon. Saquon, he was going to be the number one pick. And then it ended up being Baker Mayfield. And you get some other trades, when Mac Jones was being traded, or Mac Jones and Trey Lance and all those guys were being drafted. The 49ers made that trade to come up, and it throws everything off. And I'm not saying, Caleb Williams not having an agent will just make the Bears trade out of the first overall pick or make him just fall in general. I think he's done too much now, and there's been too much hype built around him. But nobody really knows how it'll affect him. You kind of saw it with Lamar Jackson, but he was never the presumably first overall pick. And, with him, it all turned out well. And there could be some positives with this, just that I wanted to bring up from my point of view. If I was an executive and if I was someone evaluating Caleb Williams, I would say, to me, as a person, it shows a lot of maturity from Caleb Williams, to feel like, if you're Caleb Williams, to have that mature level to yourself, to think you're able to do that at such a young age, coming into the NFL. I think that's something that would interest me if I was an executive, picking in the top 5, top 3. I think that's something I would want to learn more about and could potentially benefit more because, you're directly talking to him about business, about contracts, about how he's feeling. You don't have to go through another party and kind of have that level of communication sort of interrupted. The direct communication is going with the player. You can get exactly how he feels, where his mind is at, and always talk to him. Have that level of communication is always better. And at the same time, for him, it's just more decision making falls on him. He could really evaluate what he feels, what he wants to do, rather than having, his agent bringing up other options, other opportunities, potentially more money elsewhere. It all falls on him. He could sit down and evaluate everything for himself. And just going back to and kind of connecting it back to NIL and college athletes. Now, I think it's not really a trend right now, but I feel like it's going to become more of a trend because these players are now being held more accountable. There's more money involved. There's more responsibility involved. And I think we're going to see these younger people make more money earlier in their careers, regardless if they go to the pros or not. College sports are almost already like the pros. They're going to be making more important decisions earlier on, and I think the no agent thing is going to start to become more of a trend with these guys that are always being built up and always have the media attention around them. They're going to start making some more important decisions earlier on, and I think it will become a regular. We're going to see more quarterbacks, more defensive players be representing themselves because it's all starting to fall on them a lot more from an earlier age that it could benefit them in some way. They could accept it, run with it, and grow because of it, get more mature because of it. Or some of them, it will harm them. They'll realize that, this might not be for them, and they might require an agent, or it might harm them further more than that. And I think right now we're in the early stages of that, but I believe it won't be long until we see this start to become a trend, as well as other things, potentially players starting their own agency, running their own agency and stuff like that, and having more business savvy traits about them that players in the past that we've seen not have. And it's very interesting to talk about it. Of course, it's in the early stages, like I mentioned, but I think Caleb Williams is one example of it starting to pick up a little bit with him and all the attention he gets. And I think it's just going to be, he's going to trailblaze a new path for athletes to kind of follow him. And if it all works out really good for him and he benefits, makes a lot of money, has a great career, the process, the pace that this is all ramping up will only increase a lot more if he has a lot of success in the league and more players will jump on the opportunity and basically just copy him because of the level of success that he had. It's something interesting to think about. It kind of got my mind thinking of where this could all end up once I saw the news of him not having an agent. And hopefully it all works out for him. He looks like a great player, a lot of talent to him. Hopefully he gets to an NFL organization that is able to get all that talent out of him and get all the skills out of him as well to benefit him and have a great career. And that's where we're going to leave that topic. A very interesting one I thought to bring up here. And for now, I'm going to send it to another quick break, the last break of the show. And we're going to come back and talk about a more of an open-ended question about the draft, whether it's better to draft a franchise guy because you're in a top position in the draft to just get your franchise guy out of the way, get him on your team, or is it better to play the long game, stockpile drafts, improve your team around a temporary quarterback, and then bring in a quarterback when your team is ready and up for the challenge of developing that quarterback? That'll be on the other side of the break. Don't go anywhere. There's going to be a lot to talk about that. So we'll be right back.